onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage, thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. And farther. All right. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. 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 Thrust, wrap, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, offside, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, step, wrap, disengage. Thrust, wrap, onside, offside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. And to throw that one high, my mistake. Thrust, onside, offside, onside, offside, block, wrap. Keep throwing it low. Off, onside, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block. Time. Offside, block. Onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside. Ooh, missed my foot. Offside. Block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, 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 block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, offside, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, wrap, offside. I said thrust, wrap. It's not what I'm doing. Yeah, okay. The mic is actually turned on this time. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. 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 Am I actually out of engagement range? Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Woo! Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Slid off his face. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Thrust, onside, offside, block, wrap, disengage. Time. Ugh. Thrust, onside, offside. Step, pivot, pivot, pivot. Thrust, 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 step offside. Step, pivot, pivot, pivot. Thrust, offside. Ugh. Thrust, offside. Step, pivot, pivot, pivot. Thrust, step offside. Step, pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, step offside. Step offside. Step pivot, pivot, pivot. Thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, step offside, step offside, step pivot, step pivot, pivot. Step thrust, pivot offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step step, pivot, pivot, pivot. Time. Thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Right, I need the shield. Step thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Just do that. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Okay. Thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step on the thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Thrust, step offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step, step. No, I don't like that one as much. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. Step thrust, offside, step pivot, pivot, pivot. And time.